In the glittering heart of New York City, where fortunes are made and secrets are buried, an empire was about to be shaken by the simplest of things, a tarnished silver necklace. Janira Ashford, the formidable matriarch of the multi-billion-dollar Ashford Health Corporation, was a woman carved from ice, her emotions locked away for decades. But one rainy Tuesday, inside the Michelin-starred restaurant Le Bernardin, her carefully constructed world shattered. It wasn't a hostile takeover or a stock market crash that brought her down. It was the sight of a simple piece of jewelry on a 24-year-old waitress, a struggling orphan named Nina. What followed was a public breakdown that would set in motion a chain of events revealing a 25-year-old tragedy, a web of deceit, and a truth far more shocking than anyone could have ever imagined. The rain fell in relentless sheets against the panoramic windows of Le Bernardin, blurring the lights of Midtown Manhattan into a watercolor wash. Inside, the atmosphere was one of hushed reverence. The clinking of silverware on porcelain and the soft murmur of conversations were the only sounds that dared to challenge the restaurant's cathedral-like silence. At a secluded corner table sat Janira Ashford. At 80 years old, she possessed an aura of intimidating power. Dressed in a Chanel suit the color of charcoal, with a multi-strand pearl necklace that cost more than the average American home, she looked less like a diner and more like a queen holding court. Her face, a roadmap of elegant wrinkles, was set in its usual mask of stern indifference. Her luncheon companion, a sycophantic board member named Philip, was droning on about quarterly earnings and market projections. Janira wasn't listening. She was merely enduring, a ritual she performed with the same stoic discipline she applied to every other aspect of her life since her husband Charles passed away, and long before that, since the day her world had truly lost its color. And the projections for the new oncology drug are simply staggering, Janira. Truly, Philip said, his voice slick with admiration. Janira took a delicate sip of her water, her gaze sweeping idly across the dining room. It was then that she saw her, the waitress. The young woman was moving with a quiet efficiency that spoke of long hours and aching feet. Her uniform was immaculate, a simple black dress with a crisp white apron. Her light brown hair was pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense bun, but a few stray wisps had escaped, softening the lines of her face. She looked tired, but there was a resilience in her posture, a dignity in her weary eyes. She was refilling water glasses at a nearby table when the light from the chandelier caught something on her chest. It was a necklace, a simple silver chain, clearly not worth much. From it hung a small, intricately designed pendant, a star jasmine flower, its 5 petals delicately carved, with a tiny, almost imperceptible sapphire at its center. Janira's breath hitched. The crystal water glass in her hand trembled, a tiny silent earthquake. The sound of Philip's voice faded into a meaningless buzz. The entire opulent room seemed to recede, narrowing into a tunnel that focused solely on that necklace. It couldn't be. It was a one-of-a-kind piece. Charles had commissioned it from a reclusive artisan in Florence for their daughter Lily on her 16th birthday. Lily had adored jasmine flowers. She called them her starlights. Janira could still hear her daughter's laughter, a sound she hadn't truly heard in 25 years. "It's my star, Mama, to guide me." The waitress, Nina Petrova, according to her name tag, finished with the table in turn. As she moved, the locket swung slightly, and for a fleeting second, Janira saw that it was indeed a locket. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic prisoner. She remembered the inscription on the back, the private words from a father to his beloved child. "My starlight, forever bright." "Excuse me," Janira's voice cut through Philip's monologue, sharp and brittle. Nina turned, a polite, professional smile on her face. "Yes, ma'am. Can I get you something?" Janira didn't answer. She was rising from her chair, her movements stiff, her eyes locked on Nina's chest. Philip looked on, bewildered. That necklace," Janira managed to say, her voice hoarse. She took a step closer, her perfectly manicured hand reaching out, trembling. Nina instinctively took a step back, a flicker of alarm in her brown eyes. She clutched the pendant protectively. "I'm sorry, ma'am?" "Where did you get it?" Janira demanded, her voice louder now, cracking with an emotion so raw It stunned the nearby tables into silence. All pretense of composure was gone. This was not the unshakable CEO of Ashford Health. This was a woman on the edge of a precipice. It, it was my mother's, Nina stammered, intimidated by the sudden, intense scrutiny. It's the only thing I have of hers. The words struck Gennaro like a physical blow. My mother's, Lily. The dam that had held back a quarter-century of grief, of guilt, of unbearable, unending loss, finally broke. A choked sob escaped her lips. The sound was horrifying in the pristine silence of the restaurant. Her legs gave way, and she stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the table, scattering silverware with a clatter. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Nina rushed forward, her alarm replaced by genuine concern. But Gennaro couldn't speak. Her meticulously controlled world had dissolved into a blur of tears. She saw not a waitress, but the ghost of her daughter. Her Lily, who had run away at 18, pregnant and terrified, vanishing from their lives without a trace. They had searched for years, spent millions on private investigators, but it was as if she had been erased from the earth. The prevailing theory, the one Gennaro refused to accept but which haunted her darkest nights, was that she had met a terrible end. And now here was a young woman, about the age Lily's child would be, wearing her unique, irreplaceable locket. The formidable Gennaro Ashford, the Iron Lady of the pharmaceutical world, sank into the plush carpet of Le Bernardin, her body racked with sobs that seemed to be pulled from the very depths of her soul. She wept for the daughter she had lost, for the grandchild she never knew she had, and for the sudden, impossible, terrifying hope that had just exploded in her heart. The entire restaurant stared in stunned silence as the billionaire broke down, utterly and completely at the feet of a bewildered waitress. The aftermath was chaos. The restaurant manager, a man named Jean-Luc, who was usually the epitome of unflappable French sophistication, scurried over, his face pale with panic. Philip, the board member, stood uselessly, flapping his hands as if trying to swat away the scene's sheer awkwardness. It was Nina who acted with a surprising calm. Kneeling beside the weeping woman, she spoke in a soft, steady voice, offering a glass of water and murmuring reassurances until Gennaro's driver and personal assistant were summoned and the distraught matriarch was guided out of the restaurant, away from the prying eyes and whispering patrons. Nina thought that was the end of the bizarre, unsettling encounter. She was wrong. It was only the beginning. The next morning, a black Bentley, so polished it seemed to drink the morning light, purred to a stop outside her rundown apartment building in Queens. A man in a tailored suit, Henderson, Gennaro's long-serving butler and confidant, stepped out and delivered a message. Mrs. Ashford required Nina's presence at her residence. A car was waiting for her. Hesitantly, Nina agreed. Curiosity and a strange sense of obligation warred with her deep-seated suspicion. People from Park Avenue penthouses didn't summon waitresses from Queens unless something was very wrong. The Bentley whisked her into a world she had only ever seen in movies. The Ashford residence occupied the top 2 floors of one of the most exclusive buildings on Park Avenue. The private elevator opened directly into a foyer larger than her entire apartment. The place was an art gallery of quiet, astronomical wealth. Polished marble floors, soaring ceilings, walls adorned with original Rothkos and de Koonings, and windows that offered a god's-eye view of Central Park. Gennaro was waiting for her in a vast living room, seated on a silk sofa. The frailty from the previous day was gone, replaced by a tense, fragile composure. She looked older in the daylight, the grief etched more deeply into her features. "Miss Petrova," she began, her voice still raspy. "Please sit." Nina perched nervously on the edge of a chair that was probably worth more than her college tuition debt. "I apologize for my behavior yesterday," Gennaro said, looking at her hands. "It was unpardonable." "It's okay," Nina said quietly. "You were just upset." Gennaro's gaze lifted, and it was filled with an unnerving intensity. "That locket," she said, getting straight to the point. "You said it was your mother's. Tell me about her. Tell me everything." And so Nina told her story. It wasn't a long one. She was an orphan. She was left at a church-run orphanage, St. Jude's Home for Children, when she was an infant. There was no note, no name, just a baby wrapped in a blanket with a silver locket clutched in her tiny fist. The nuns had given her a name, Nina Petrova, and raised her. She knew nothing of her parents, her past, her lineage. The locket was her only link to a history she couldn't access. As Nina spoke, Gennaro listened with rapt, painful attention. Every word seemed to confirm the wild hope that had taken root in her heart. An orphan, the right age, and the locket, the undeniable proof. When Nina finished, Gennaro took a deep, shuddering breath. "My daughter," she began, her voice trembling. "Her name was Lily. She ran away from home 25 years ago. She was pregnant. We never saw her again." She paused, gathering her strength. "That locket was hers. I would know it anywhere. My husband had it made for her. There is no other like it in the world." The implication hung in the silent, cavernous room. Nina stared at her, her mind struggling to process the impossible idea. Her? The granddaughter of this titan of industry? It was the stuff of fairy tales, of lottery winner fantasies. It couldn't be real. "That means—" Nina trailed off, unable to form the words. "It means you are my granddaughter," Gennaro said, the words a mixture of statement and prayer. A tear traced a path down her powdered cheek. "You are Lily's child." Before Nina could react, the doors to the living room slid open, and a man in his late 40s entered, followed by a woman dripping in diamonds. The man had Gennaro's sharp features, but where her eyes held a deep, hidden well of sorrow, his were cold and calculating. "Mother," he said, his voice smooth but with an edge of steel, "Henderson informed me we had a guest. What is all this?" "Jeffrey, this is Nina," Gennaro announced, her voice gaining strength. "This is Lily's daughter, my granddaughter." Jeffrey Ashford, CEO of Ashford Health, and Gennaro's only surviving child, stopped dead. His eyes flickered from his mother to Nina, a look of utter disbelief quickly hardening into contemptuous suspicion. His wife, Beatrice, let out a small, theatrical gasp. "Mother, have you lost your mind?" Jeffrey sneered, his gaze raking over Nina's simple jeans and worn-out sweater. "You bring this person into our home based on what? A piece of cheap jewelry?" "It is not cheap, Jeffrey. It was Lily's," Gennaro snapped back, a flash of her old fire returning. "A convenient story from a girl who clearly needs money," Beatrice added, her voice dripping with venom. "How much did you pay for it at a pawn shop, dear?" Nina flinched as if struck. She stood up, her cheeks burning with humiliation. "I should go," she said, her voice tight. "This was a mistake." "No," Gennaro cried, reaching out. "Don't listen to them. They don't understand." She turned on her son. "This is not about money, Jeffrey. This is about family. It's about my daughter." "Your daughter is gone, Mother," Jeffrey said coldly. "She made her choice and disappeared. We have to stop chasing ghosts, and we certainly don't need to entertain fortune hunters." He turned his dismissive gaze back to Nina. "I don't know what game you're playing, but it's over. Get out of this house." The air crackled with tension. Nina felt like a cornered animal, caught between a grieving old woman's desperate hope and her son's venomous hostility. She looked at Gennaro's pleading, tear-filled eyes, and then at Jeffrey's cruel, arrogant face. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was a snake pit. "A DNA test," Gennaro declared, her voice ringing with authority. "We will have a DNA test. That will prove it to you, Jeffrey. It will prove everything." Jeffrey's lips curled into a smirk. "Fine, by all means. Let's put this fantasy to rest once and for all." Gennaro ignored him, her focus entirely on Nina. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please stay. Don't let him chase you away. I've just found you." She offered Nina a new life, a world of unimaginable wealth and privilege. But more than that, she offered her a name, a history, a family. It was everything Nina had ever dreamed of. But as she looked at Jeffrey's hostile glare, she knew that accepting this gilded invitation meant walking into a war she was not prepared to fight. Against her better judgment, Nina agreed to the DNA test. And while they waited for the arrangements to be made and the results to be processed, Gennaro insisted she move into the penthouse. "It's not safe for you in that apartment," she had declared, a statement that was less about security and more about possession. "You are a Ashford now. You will live like one." The transition was jarring, like being plunged from icy water into a boiling bath. One day, Nina was worried about making rent and calculating tips to see if she could afford new work shoes. The next, she was waking up in a bedroom the size of a tennis court, with a walk-in closet filled with designer clothes Janira's personal shopper had procured. The fabrics were alien to her skin: cashmere, silk, merino wool. The price tag on a single handbag could have paid off her entire student loan debt. But it was not a home. It was a gilded cage, beautiful and cold. The silence was the most oppressive part. In her cramped Queens apartment, the sounds of traffic, of neighbors arguing, of life, were a constant companion. Here, the only sounds were the hushed footsteps of the household staff on thick Persian rugs and the distant, sterile hum of the building's climate control. Janira was a constant, almost suffocating presence. She wanted to fill the 25-year void in a matter of days. She showed Nina old photo albums, her voice thick with emotion as she pointed out a laughing, vibrant girl with Janira's eyes. "That was your mother, Lily," she would say over and over. "You have her smile." Nina didn't see the resemblance. She would look at her reflection in the vast mirrors and see only herself. Nina Petrova, the waitress, an imposter playing a role she hadn't auditioned for. She felt a profound sense of guilt, as if she were robbing this old woman of her grief, replacing it with a false hope that might soon be shattered. The most chilling part of her new existence, however, was Jeffrey and Beatrice. They treated her not as a potential relative, but as an infestation. Their politeness was a thin, brittle veneer over a seething resentment. "I do hope you're comfortable," Beatrice would say, her smile never reaching her eyes, her tone implying Nina was more suited to the servants' quarters. "It must all be quite a shock after, well, wherever it is you come from." Jeffrey was more direct in his hostility. He saw her as a direct threat to his inheritance and his control over the Ashford empire. He was the sole heir, the one who had dutifully stayed, who had managed the company, who had borne the weight of the Ashford name while Lily had selfishly run off. The idea that her progeny could suddenly appear and claim a piece of what he considered rightfully his was intolerable. One evening, he cornered her in the library, a vast two-story room lined with leather-bound books that looked as if they had never been opened. "You're very clever, I'll give you that," he began, swirling a glass of amber liquid. "Finding that locket, learning my mother's tragic little story, it's a masterful performance." "I'm not performing," Nina said, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "Your mother found me. I didn't ask for any of this." "Oh, I'm sure," he sneered. "Just a poor little orphan who happens to stumble into a multi-billion-dollar inheritance. These things happen all the time. But let me give you a piece of advice. When those DNA results come back and they prove you're a fraud, my mother's disappointment will be immense. She is a fragile woman. The shock might be damaging." The threat was veiled but unmistakable. He wasn't just warning her. He was telling her what would happen. He was painting a picture of a devastated old woman whose heartbreak would be Nina's fault. "But," he continued, taking a step closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "it doesn't have to be that way. There could be a way for you to walk away from this with a parting gift, a severance package, if you will, enough to ensure you never have to wait tables again, disappear, and I'll make you a wealthy woman, far wealthier than you could ever dream." The offer was disgusting. He was trying to buy her off, to pay her to invalidate his own mother's hope. "My parting gift," Nina said, her voice laced with ice, "will be the truth, whatever it is, and I'm not for sale." She walked away, leaving him standing alone in the silent library, but his cold, calculating stare followed her. She knew then that he was not a man who would leave things to chance. If he couldn't buy her, he would find another way to destroy her. The gilded cage had suddenly grown teeth. Jeffrey Ashford did not believe in leaving things to fate, especially when billions of dollars were on the line. The day after Nina's defiance in the library, he made a call. The recipient was a man named Rex Hogan, a name that never appeared on the letterhead of any reputable law firm or private investigation agency. Hogan operated in the shadows of the corporate world, a specialist in digging up dirt, manufacturing doubt, and making problems disappear. His office was a small, grimy space in Hell's Kitchen that smelled of stale coffee and desperation. "I have a job for you, Rex," Jeffrey said, his voice clipped and devoid of pleasantries. "There's a girl, Nina Petrova. She's claiming to be my long-lost niece." Hogan let out a low whistle. "The Ashford niece? Thought that was a cold case." "It is. And this girl is a fraud," Jeffrey snapped. "I want you to prove it. Dig into her life. I want to know every person she's ever spoken to, every dollar she's ever earned, every mistake she's ever made. I want you to find something, anything, that I can use to expose her. Find a criminal record, a disgruntled ex-boyfriend, a gambling debt. If you can't find it, create it. I don't care about your methods, just your results. I want her buried." "Consider her 6 feet under," Hogan grunted. "My rates have gone up." "I don't care," Jeffrey said and hung up. Hogan went to work with a ruthless efficiency. He was a phantom, moving through the periphery of Nina's life. He interviewed her former co-workers at the Morning Glory Diner, posing as a credit checker, planting seeds of suspicion about her character. He hacked into her meager social media accounts, searching for any scrap of incriminating evidence. He paid a visit to her resentful former landlord, a man she'd had disputes with over a faulty heating system, and coaxed out exaggerated stories of late-night noise and unpaid dues. Simultaneously, Nina was on her own quest for the truth. The penthouse felt more and more like a prison, and she needed answers, not for Janera or Jeffrey, but for herself. Armed with a new, almost unlimited source of funds from a credit card Janera had insisted she take, she hired a legitimate private investigator, a retired but highly respected NYPD detective named Frank Miller. "I don't want to find dirt on anyone," Nina explained to the grizzled, kind-eyed man in his modest office. "I just want to know who I am. I want to find out what happened to my mother. All I have is a name, Lily Ashford, and a place, St. Jude's Home for Children." Frank Miller, intrigued by the case, agreed. While Hogan was digging for mud, Miller began excavating the past. His first stop was St. Jude's. The orphanage was old, underfunded, and the records from 25 years ago were sparse, kept in dusty, decaying file boxes in a damp basement. But Miller was persistent. After 2 days of sifting through brittle paper, he found it. An intake form for a baby Jane Doe, dated October 12th, nearly 25 years ago. The form noted the baby was found on the steps of the adjacent church, wrapped in a blue blanket. Tucked into the file was a small sealed envelope made of yellowed paper. It had been overlooked for decades. Inside was a single faded Polaroid photograph. It showed 2 young women, no older than 18, their arms slung around each other, smiling brightly at the camera. One was undeniably a young Lily Ashford, her face identical to the pictures in Janera's albums. The other was a girl with kind, dark eyes and a cascade of black curly hair. On the back of the photo, a faint, spidery script read, "Lily and Sarah, sisters forever. Summer 00." "Sarah," Miller murmured to himself. It was the first new lead in 25 years. Meanwhile, Rex Hogan was hitting dead ends. Nina's life was disappointingly clean. She worked hard, paid her bills, mostly on time, and had no criminal history. Frustrated, Hogan decided to shift from finding the truth to creating a new one. He found a disgruntled, drug-addicted ex-boyfriend of one of Nina's old roommates. For $5,000, the man was more than happy to spin a story for Jeffrey about how Nina had been involved in selling stolen goods and had often bragged about conning a rich family one day. It was a flimsy, pathetic lie, but it might be enough to plant the seed of doubt Jeffrey needed. Unaware of the 2 clandestine investigations swirling around her, Nina felt the walls closing in. The DNA test was scheduled for the end of the week. Dr. Lang, the Ashford family's personal physician for over 30 years, would come to the penthouse to take the samples. Jeffrey seemed smugly confident, his threats hanging in the air. Janera was a nervous wreck, swinging between ecstatic hope and paralyzing fear. One night, unable to sleep, Nina took the locket from her neck. She had opened it 1,000 times, but she did so again. Inside, on one side, was a tiny, impossibly faded picture of a newborn baby, herself. The other side was empty, a polished silver surface meant for another photo that was never placed. She ran her thumb over the inscription on the back. My starlight, forever bright. A thought struck her. It was a strange inscription for a mother to give her own child before abandoning her. It sounded more like a memory, a dedication to someone else. She stared at the star jasmine design, a flower she now knew was so important to Lily Ashford. A deep, unsettling feeling began to grow in the pit of her stomach. The story wasn't adding up. She felt like a puzzle piece being forced into the wrong place. And she feared that when the truth finally came out, the picture it revealed would be one no one was expecting. The day of the DNA test dawned gray and oppressive. The sky over Manhattan, the color of slate. The atmosphere in the Ashford penthouse was thick with unspoken anxiety. Janira paced her living room, her silk robe trailing behind her like a royal train, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Jeffrey sat in a leather armchair, reading the Wall Street Journal with a performative calm, a small, cruel smirk playing on his lips whenever he caught Nina's eye. Dr. Lang arrived precisely at 10 a.m., a portly man with a gentle demeanor that did little to ease the tension. The process was simple and clinical. A swab from Janira's cheek, a swab from Nina's. Labeled, sealed, and placed into a biohazard bag for transport to a trusted, high-security lab. The results will be ready in 48 hours, Dr. Lang announced, his voice echoing in the silent room. As he was leaving, Jeffrey walked him to the door, his hand on the doctor's shoulder, speaking in low, confidential tones that Nina couldn't quite hear. A chill went down her spine. She saw Jeffrey slip a card into the doctor's pocket. It wasn't a business card. It looked like a key card, a gesture of friendship, or a transaction. With the samples taken, the waiting began, an agonizing limbo. Janira retreated into herself, unable to speak, her hope and fear now locked in a final, terrible battle. Seeking refuge from the suffocating tension, Nina wandered into the west wing of the penthouse, an area she hadn't explored. It was dimmer, quieter, dust covers draped over most of the furniture. It was Lily's wing. Her bedroom had been preserved exactly as she had left it 25 years ago. It was a time capsule of a teenage girl's life in the late 90s. Posters of bands on the wall, a bulky desktop computer on her desk, a collection of worn paperbacks on a shelf. It was here that Henderson, the butler, found her. He had served the Ashfords since before Lily was born and was one of the few people in the house who treated Nina with a quiet, respectful kindness. He stood in the doorway, holding a silver tray with a cup of tea. I thought you might like this, Miss Nina, he said softly. Thank you, Henderson, she said, giving him a weak smile. I needed to see. Henderson's gaze grew distant, lost in memory. She spent so much time in here, especially in those last few months. She was always writing. In her journal. Nina's head snapped up. A journal? Is it still here? Henderson's face fell. We looked for it after she left. Mrs. Ashford was desperate for answers, but we never found it. We assumed she took it with her. He paused, his brow furrowed in thought. It's strange. I remember something she said to me, just a week before she disappeared. I was tidying her room, and I went to straighten a loose floorboard beneath her window seat. She nearly jumped out of her skin. Don't touch that, Henderson, she said. It's a secret place for my treasures. His eyes widened slightly. We never thought to check the floorboards. Together they went to the window seat. Nina knelt, her fingers tracing the seams in the old hardwood. She found it, a single board whose edges seemed just slightly raised. Using the edge of a letter opener from the desk, she carefully pried it up. Beneath it lay a small, dust-covered cavity, and inside was a single object, a leather-bound journal with the initials LB embossed in gold. Her hands trembling, Nina opened it. The first few pages were filled with the typical thoughts of a privileged teenage girl, complaints about school, notes about friends, dreams of traveling the world. But as the entries progressed, the tone changed. It became secretive, scared. Then came the bombshell. March 12th. I'm pregnant. I can't believe it. I told Father, and he was furious. Not at me, but at him. He said I've ruined my life. He wants to handle it. I know what that means. He wants me to get rid of it. But it's a part of me. A part of the man I loved. The entries grew more frantic. Lily wrote of feeling trapped, of her father's cold fury, and her mother's oblivious social planning. Then another name began to appear frequently. Sarah, April 5th. Only Sarah understands. She's my best friend, my only friend. Her situation is almost as bad as mine. Her family threw her out when they found out she was pregnant too. We're in this together. We've made a pact. We're going to run away. Together. Find a place where we can raise our babies in peace, away from all of this. Nina's blood ran cold. Sarah, the girl from the photograph Frank Miller had found, she was pregnant too. She flipped through the pages, her heart pounding. The last entry was dated the night Lily disappeared. October 9th. We leave tonight. Jeffrey found out. I don't know how. He confronted me. He was horrible. He said I was a disgrace, that I was dragging the family name through the mud. He said father would disinherit me completely. But the way he said it, it was a threat. It felt like he wanted me gone. Sarah is waiting for me with the car. I packed my things. I'm taking the locket father gave me. Sarah loves it so much, she calls it my lucky star. I told her it would keep us both safe. She is so scared. I think I am too. I'm leaving this journal here, a final piece of me in this house. If something happens, maybe Mama will find it and understand. I have to go. For me, for my baby, for Sarah. Nina dropped the journal. It all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. 2 girls, both pregnant, running away together. 1 locket, 1 baby left at an orphanage. The inscription, "My starlight, forever bright," wasn't for a baby. It was a memory, a dedication. The locket wasn't hers. It belonged to Lily. And she wasn't Lily's daughter. The profound, earth-shattering realization hit her like a physical force. She was Sarah's child. Lily, her mother's best friend, must have died. Maybe they were in an accident. Maybe Sarah survived just long enough to have her baby, and in her grief and desperation, left Lily's locket with her child, a final, desperate plea for the powerful Ashford family to find and care for the baby of her lost friend. But they had found the wrong one, or rather, they had found the right baby with the wrong story. Just as this truth settled over her, her phone buzzed. It was Frank Miller. "Nina," he said, his voice grave, "I found something. An old police report from a neighboring state. A John Doe car crash. 25 years ago, the night Lily Ashford disappeared. A single car went off a ravine in a storm. 2 female victims, late teens. One was Jane Doe number 1. The other, Jane Doe number 2, was found with a wallet. The ID said Sarah Jenkins. She was rushed to a local hospital but died during an emergency C-section. The baby survived." Nina sank to the floor, the diary in her lap, the phone pressed to her ear. The pieces of her life, a mystery for 24 years, had just assembled themselves into a picture of pure tragedy. And in 48 hours, a DNA test was going to prove to the world that she was a fraud, just as Jeffrey had always claimed. The next 24 hours were the longest of Nina's life. She was trapped in a terrible paradox. She now held the truth, the real, heartbreaking truth, in the form of Lily's diary and Frank Miller's police report. But revealing it meant destroying Janira's last hope. It meant proving Jeffrey right. It meant admitting, in front of everyone, that she was not a Ashford. She would be cast out, branded a liar and a con artist, even though she had never asked for any of this. Meanwhile, Jeffrey was making his final move. The night before the results were due, he drove to the private laboratory, a state-of-the-art facility called Gentech Diagnostics. He didn't use the front door. He used the key card he had slipped to Dr. Lang, which granted him after-hours access to the administrative wing. His destination was the office of a senior lab technician named Alan Croft, a man whose gambling debts Jeffrey, through Rex Hogan, had discovered and quietly purchased. Croft was waiting, sweating under the fluorescent lights. "Mr. Ashford," he stammered, "this is highly irregular." "The only thing irregular, Alan, would be a foreclosure on your house and a visit from some very unhappy gentleman regarding your poker game," Jeffrey said smoothly, placing a thick envelope on the desk. "This is a down payment. You'll get the rest when it's done." He slid a small sealed vial across the desk. It contained a saliva sample from a distant Ashford cousin, genetically related but distant enough to show a familial link without being a direct match. An anomaly, Jeffrey instructed. The test results need to be inconclusive, not a definitive no, which would look suspicious given the locket. I want ambiguity. Potential familial link cannot be ruled out, but is not a direct maternal match. Something that casts doubt on her, confuses my mother, and allows me to paint Nina as a charlatan from a distant, illegitimate branch of the family trying to cash in. It destroys her credibility without making me look like the bad guy. Croft nodded, his hands shaking as he took the vial. It will be done. The following afternoon, the atmosphere in the penthouse was electric. Dr. Lang was scheduled to arrive at 3 p.m. with the official results. Janera sat ramrod straight on the sofa, her face a pale, unreadable mask. Nina stood by the window, clutching Lily's diary in a tote bag, feeling like a condemned prisoner waiting for the executioner. Jeffrey stood by the fireplace, the picture of confident authority. The doorbell chimed. It was Dr. Lang. He held a sealed manila envelope. Well, Janera breathed, unable to remain seated any longer. Before you open that, Nina said, her voice surprisingly strong. Everyone turned to look at her. She walked to the center of the room and took a deep breath. She could let the fake results expose her as a fraud, or she could tell the truth. She chose the truth. There's something you all need to see, she said, pulling the leather-bound journal from her bag. I found Lily's diary. Jeffrey's face went white. Of all the possibilities he had prepared for, this was not one of them. What is this nonsense, he blustered. A forgery, no doubt. Part of her pathetic little scheme. Is it, Jeffrey? Nina asked, her eyes locking onto his. Because she mentions you in her last entry, the night she left. Janera snatched the diary from Nina's hands, her fingers fumbling with the pages. Nina guided her to the last entry. As Janera read, a strangled gasp escaped her lips. Her eyes, wide with horror, darted from the page to her son. Jeffrey found out. He was horrible. He said I was a disgrace. It felt like he wanted me gone. Janera read the words aloud, her voice a trembling whisper. What is this, Jeffrey? What did you do? It's the ramblings of a hysterical, pregnant teenager, he shot back, his composure finally cracking. She was emotional. She was twisting my words. Was she? Nina pressed, her courage surging. There was someone with her that night, her best friend, Sarah Jenkins. She was also pregnant. They were running away together. She pulled out the faded Polaroid of Lily and Sarah and laid it on the coffee table. There was a car crash that night. Lily died at the scene. But Sarah, my mother, survived long enough to be taken to a hospital. She gave birth to me, and then she died. In her grief for her friend, she must have left me with the only valuable thing she had, Lily's locket, hoping your family would find me. The room was utterly silent, save for Janera's ragged breathing. The entire narrative, the entire 25-year-old mystery, had been rewritten in a matter of minutes. It's a lie, Jeffrey roared, lunging for the diary. A fantastic story she's concocted. Then let's open the envelope, Nina said calmly, gesturing to the results in Dr. Lang's hand. Let's see what your paid-for science has to say. The accusation hung in the air, deadly and precise. Jeffrey froze, his face a mask of fury and panic. He knew what the results would say, inconclusive, the perfect, ambiguous result to discredit a potential relative. But now, in the context of Nina's story, inconclusive would look like a desperate attempt at a cover-up. It wouldn't prove she was a fraud. It would prove he was a manipulator. Janera looked from the diary to her son's terrified face, and finally to the DNA results. The truth, in all its forms, was laid bare before her. Her daughter was truly gone. Her son was a monster, and the young woman before her was not her blood, but was inextricably, tragically linked to her daughter's final moments. With a cry of anguish, Janera tore open the envelope. She didn't even need to read the jargon-filled report. The look on her son's face had already told her everything she needed to know. The grand, desperate hope for a granddaughter was dead, but in its place was a new, terrible certainty about the son who stood before her. The doctored DNA report lay on the coffee table, its inconclusive findings rendered meaningless by the raw, undeniable truth of Lily's diary. The carefully constructed web of lies Jeffrey had woven for decades had unraveled in an instant. "You knew," Gennaro whispered, her voice hollow with betrayal. She wasn't looking at the report. She was staring at her son as if seeing him for the first time. "You knew she wasn't alone. You knew she was running away, and you let me believe she had simply vanished. You let me grieve a mystery for 25 years. I was trying to protect the family name." Jeffrey defended himself, his voice shrill with desperation. "She was a disgrace, tainting our bloodline with some boy from the stables. I told her to get rid of it, and when she wouldn't, I told her if she left, she would be dead to this family. I was protecting our legacy." "Our legacy?" Gennaro's voice rose, no longer a whisper, but a roar of pure, undiluted fury that seemed to shake the very foundations of the penthouse. "Our legacy is not in stock prices or boardrooms, you fool. It was in her. It was in the child she was carrying. You didn't protect our legacy, you drove it off a cliff." The weight of his actions finally crashed down upon him. His cruelty, his ambition, his cold-hearted manipulation, it was all laid bare. He had not merely been a hostile brother. His threats and rage had been the final push that sent his sister out into a stormy night, into her death. "Henderson," Gennaro commanded, her voice like cracking ice. "Call security. Have Mr. Ashford escorted from the premises. He is no longer welcome in this house. His access to all company accounts is to be revoked immediately. I want him out of my life." "Mother, you can't," Jeffrey pleaded, his arrogance evaporating into pathetic panic. "The company, my position." "You have no position," Gennaro stated with chilling finality. "You have nothing. You are as dead to me now as you wished your sister to be." As security guards escorted a protesting, defeated Jeffrey from the room, a profound silence descended. It was just Nina and Gennaro, two strangers bound by a shared tragedy. The vast, opulent room felt like a tomb. Gennaro sank onto the sofa, her body trembling, the diary clutched to her chest like a sacred relic. She looked at Nina, her eyes filled with a grief so immense, Nina felt she was staring into an abyss. "All this time," Gennaro wept, her voice breaking, "I was praying for a miracle, for a piece of my Lily to be returned to me, and the universe gave me you." She shook her head, a fresh wave of tears flowing. "But you are not hers." "No," Nina said softly, kneeling in front of the broken woman. "I'm not. I'm Sarah's daughter." She reached out and gently took one of Gennaro's trembling hands. "But your daughter died trying to protect my mother. Her last act on this earth was one of friendship, of love. She gave my mother her lucky star to keep her safe." She gestured to the locket still around her neck. "Maybe I'm not the granddaughter you were searching for, but I am a part of her story. I'm the living result of your daughter's courage and her capacity for love. In a way, I am her legacy too." The words hung in the air, simple and profound. Gennaro looked at Nina, at her earnest, kind eyes, her quiet strength, the resilience that had seen her through a life of hardship and the recent turmoil of the Ashford household. She saw not an imposter, but a young woman of incredible integrity, a woman her daughter had loved like a sister. Slowly, Gennaro's grip on Nina's hand tightened. The desperate search for a blood relation was over, but something new was beginning to take its place. It wasn't the rekindling of an old family line, but the forging of a new one, a family of the heart, born from tragedy but defined by choice. "Your mother, Sarah. Lily wrote that she was brave and kind," Gennaro whispered, her tears subsiding. "I see that in you." She looked around the cold, empty room that had been her prison for so long. "This house has been without a heart for 25 years, she said. "It has only been a monument to what I lost. Perhaps you can help me make it a home again." It wasn't a question of inheritance or bloodlines anymore. It was an invitation, an offer not of wealth, but of connection, of a shared future built upon a shared, painful past. Nina looked at the old woman, no longer a billionaire matriarch, but a grandmother who had lost everything twice over, and she saw a reflection of her own loneliness. She had spent her entire life searching for a family. She had never imagined she would find it like this. "I'd like that," Nina said. and for the first time a genuine, hopeful smile touched her lips. The DNA results were wrong, but in the end, it didn't matter. The truth of the heart was stronger than the truth of the blood. In the wake of lies and loss, two lonely souls, a billionaire and a waitress, found not the family they were looking for, but the family they truly needed. And so the story of the billionaire's long-lost granddaughter came to a close. But a new, more powerful story began. It's a raw and emotional reminder that our connections to one another are often written in a language far more complex than genetics. Family isn't always about the blood that runs through our veins. It's about the love that fills our hearts, the choices we make, and the legacies of kindness we choose to carry forward. Nina wasn't the Ashford heir by birth, but she became the heir to Lily's legacy of love and friendship, proving that true wealth is found in healing, forgiveness, and the courage to build a new family from the broken pieces of the past. What did you think of this incredible story of loss and redemption? Does family mean more than just blood to you? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who loves a powerful real-life drama, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories just like this one. Your support helps us continue to bring these narratives to light. Thank you for watching.